المحاضرة السابعة of renal system.
In this lecture, we will talk about the kidney mechanism for excreting the dilute urine. Then we will talk about the extracellular fluid osmolarity and the role of the sodium concentration in calculation of this osmolarity. After that, we will discuss the osmoreceptor-ADH hormone feedback system. Finally, we will talk about thirst mechanism and the stimuli for it. The renal mechanism for excreting diluting urine. When there is ingestion of the excess of water or the food intake which consists of water, or there is excess of water in the body, the extracellular fluid osmolarity will decrease. At this time, the secretion of the antidiuretic hormone by the posterior pituitary gland will decrease as well. The tubular fluid which reach the late distal tubule and the collecting tubule is dilute, reaching about 100 millismol per liter, and it will become further diluted when there is absence of the antidiuretic hormone, because these late distal tubule and collecting tubule are almost impermeable to water in the absence of the antidiuretic hormone. This causing excreting a large amount of diluting urine, which reach as 20 liters per day, with osmolarity as low as 50 millismol per liter.
Now we will talk about the sodium concentration rule in the control of the extracellular fluid osmolarity. The normal plasma sodium concentration average about 142 milliequivalent per liter, and the extracellular fluid osmolarity is about 300 millismol per liter. The sodium and its associated anions account about 94% of the solute in the extracellular compartment. So the plasma osmolarity can be roughly approximate as plasma osmolarity equal to 2.1 رقم ثابت multiplied by the plasma sodium concentration. إذن نستطيع تخمين البلازما osmolarity من البلازما صوديوم concentration، وذلك لأنه 94% من السوليوت اللي موجودة بالإكسترا سيلولار كومبارتمنت هي due to the sodium and other anions. Okay? To be more exact, especially in the condition associated with the renal disease, the contribution of other two solutes like glucose and urea should be included in the estimation of the plasma osmolarity. For example, glucose and urea contributing in this equation of a plasma osmolarity estimation or calculation. Glucose and urea contributing about 3 to 5% of the total osmol. There are two systems which regulate the sodium concentration and osmolarity of the extracellular fluid. First of all, the osmoreceptor-ADH hormone system. Secondly, the thirst mechanism. And we will talk about each one alone. The story of the osmoreceptor-ADH hormone feedback can be explained briefly as when there is a water deficit, as decreased water intake, or في حالات الدياريا lead to an increased extracellular osmolarity which lead to the osmoreceptor to shrink, which is located at the anterior hypothalamus, leading to an increased antidiuretic hormone secretion from the posterior pituitary gland, lead to an increased plasma antidiuretic hormone concentration, which this antidiuretic hormone concentration, once increased, lead to an increase the distal tubule and collecting duct permeability to the water, lead to the more water reabsorption from the renal tubules back to the blood, and decrease water excretion of the urine. With this lead to the correction of the water deficit and return the extracellular osmolarity back to normal. هسه نحكيها in more detail. The osmoreceptor antidiuretic hormone feedback system. When the osmolarity or plasma sodium concentration increase above normal due to the water deficit, for example, this lead to the rapidly this feedback system operate as follow. ايش راح يصير؟ First of all, this cause osmoreceptor nerve cell, which is located in the anterior hypothalamus near the supraoptic nuclei, to shrink. Secondly, this shrink nuclei cause them to fire, sending a nerve signals to the nerve cells in the supraoptic nuclei and paraventricular nuclei that synthesize the antidiuretic hormone, which then spread these signals down the stalk of the pituitary gland to the posterior pituitary. This action potential stimulates the release of the antidiuretic hormone, which is stored in the secretory granules or vesicles in the nerve ending. The antidiuretic hormone, once it enters the bloodstream, and it will transport it to the kidney, where it will increase the water permeability of the late distal tubule, cortical collecting tubule, and medullary collecting duct, and this lead to increased water reabsorption and excretion of a small volume of the concentrated urine. The opposite sequence of events occur when the extracellular fluid become too dilute or what's called hypo-osmotic. نوضح أكثر بهذا المخطط إنه when there is a water deficit, this osmoreceptor at the anterior hypothalamus will be shrink. Once it shrink, it fire and send nerve signals to the supraoptic nerve cell and to the paraventricular neuron or nerve cell. These supraoptic and paraventricular nerve cell, they are the site for synthesis of the antidiuretic hormone, and then they will send the nerve signals through the pituitary stalk to the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland, and once this action potential reach to posterior lobe of pituitary gland, leading to the secretion of the antidiuretic hormone from the nerve ending vesicles, or from the vesicles at the nerve ending, which will secrete the antidiuretic hormone to the plasma and lead to increased antidiuretic hormone concentration in the plasma, which go and increase the permeability of the late of the distal tubule and cortical collecting tubule and medullary collecting duct, leading to an increased reabsorption of water back to the absorption of the water back to the blood and lead to excrete concentrated urine. The antidiuretic hormone release is also controlled by the reflexes which called cardiovascular reflexes that respond to the decreases in the blood pressure and all blood volume, including first of all the arterial baroreceptor reflexes, secondly the cardiopulmonary reflexes. These reflexes will go to the hypothalamic nuclei that control antidiuretic hormone synthesis and nuclei.
Antidiuretic hormone synthesis and secretion.
نرجع إلى هذه الصورة again. شوفوا الباروreceptors and cardiopulmonary receptors send signals, nerve signals to the nuclei اللي هي supraoptic neuron and paraventricular neuron, where they are the site of the synthesis of the antidiuretic hormone.
What are the factors that regulate antidiuretic hormone secretion? The antidiuretic hormone secretion increases in the following cases: increase plasma osmolarity, decrease blood volume, decrease blood pressure. When there is nausea, hypoxia, and where there is a drug intake as morphine, nicotine, while the antidiuretic hormone secretion decrease in the following case: decrease plasma osmolarity, increase blood volume, increase blood pressure, and when there is a drug intake as alcohol, clonidine, which is antihypertensive drug. إذا اللي the person who has the person who are cigarette smoker, they have concentrated urine because they have there will be an increase in the antidiuretic hormone secretion in them, and the people who are alcohol drink, they have diluted urine because there will be a decrease in antidiuretic hormone secretion in them. The second mechanism that regulates sodium concentration and extracellular fluid osmolarity is the thirst mechanism. Thirst mechanism regulates fluid intake and the thirst center located in the hypothalamus.
What are the stimuli for thirst? First of all, an increased extracellular fluid osmolarity, because once there's an increased extracellular fluid osmolarity lead to the intracellular dehydration of the thirst center, thereby stimulating the sensation of thirst. Secondly, decrease extracellular fluid volume and decrease arterial pressure. Third, increase angiotensin II secretion. Four, dryness of the mouth and mucous membrane of the esophagus. Dryness of the mouth and mucous membrane of the esophagus. And five, gastrointestinal and pharyngeal stimuli influence thirst. عادة gastric distension will decrease the thirst. The threshold for drinking. When the sodium concentration increases only about 2 milliequivalent per liter above normal, the thirst mechanism starts to activate, causing a desire to drink water. An increase in the sodium intake 6 times normal leads to slightly increase in the plasma sodium concentration, as long as the antidiuretic hormone and thirst mechanism are both or one of them functioning normally and there is a fluid intake. يعني ايش قد ناكل صوديوم 6 مرات than normal leads to slightly increase in the plasma sodium concentration عندما يكون الانتيدايوريتيك هرمون thirst mechanism normal functioning. Angiotensin II and aldosterone normally have little increase in the sodium concentration except under disease condition, because that ليش الانجيوتنسين 2 and aldosterone لما يزيدون ما راح يزيدون لنا الصوديوم concentration إلا قليل، ما عدا في الحالات المرضية، لأنه كلاهما يساعدان على امتصاص الصوديوم and water by the renal tubules. So they increase both sodium and water reabsorption by the renal tubules. Secondly, the antidiuretic hormone thirst system will regulate the sodium concentration when it increases due to them. وحتى لو زاد الصوديوم concentration, the antidiuretic hormone thirst system, both of them will regulate sodium concentration when it's increased due to them. What about salt appetite mechanism to control extracellular fluid sodium concentration and volume? عادة the human being can survive and function cell normally on the 10 to 20 milliequivalent per day of sodium intake. There are two primary stimuli that increase salt appetite. First of all, decrease extracellular fluid sodium concentration, and secondly, decrease blood volume or blood pressure, which associated with the circulatory insufficiency. The neuronal mechanism for salt appetite is analogous to that of the thirst mechanism. What is the integrated responses to the changes in the sodium intake normally? The kidney عادة match the salt and water excretion to the salt and water intakes in the range from as low as 1/10 of the normal to high as 10 times normal. عادة الصوديوم intake when the sodium intake is increased, the sodium output initially delay slightly behind the intake. This delay lead to the slight increase in the extracellular fluid volume and small increases in the arterial pressure. This increases in the extracellular fluid volume and slight increase in the arterial pressure lead to cause various mechanisms in the body to increase sodium excretion. What is this? This mechanism as, first of all, activation of low pressure receptor reflexes that originate from the stretch receptor of the right atrium and also in the pulmonary blood vessels. This will give us signals to the brainstem, leading to inhibit sympathetic nerve activity to the kidney, leading to decreased tubular sodium reabsorption and increase the urine excretion of the sodium. This mechanism is most important in the first few hours or perhaps the first day after a large increase in the salt and water intake. Second mechanism هي اللي pressure natriuresis. أيضا من يصير an increase of the blood pressure, it lead to the pressure natriuresis. Third, will be suppression of the angiotensin II formation, which in turn lead to decreased aldosterone secretion. Both will lead to reduced tubular sodium reabsorption. رابعا, stimulation of the natriuretic system, which especially arterial natriuretic peptide. The opposite changes will take place when the sodium intake is reduced below normal level.
So we can conclude that when there is a decrease in antidiuretic hormone secretion, the urine excretion is diluted. The plasma osmolarity depends on the sodium concentration, as it accounts about 94% of the solute in the extracellular compartment. Thank you.